Howdy folks, Mike the average backyard boat guy here. Not very mechanically inclined, but I'm not the worst either. Thought I would do a tutorial today on Mercury 4-stroke engines. Now this is a 2006, one of the first ones they ever came out with. It's been a fairly decent engine. This tutorial is about a high idle problem with it I had for about 3 years. Now it's not going to be very flattering for Mercury, but this engine runs pretty good for a 4-stroke. It was one of the first ones they ever came out with. The apparent problem with it was, there's the Mercury logo, looks like a Mercury. However, this was actually put together by Yamaha. So if you have any real deep-seated troubles with it, Mercury doesn't have the proper diagnostic programs for any of the computerized stuff in there, which Mercury never ever said that was the case, or whether or not I should go to Yamaha and see if they have any of the diagnostic computerized programs for it. So you live and learn. And whenever you live and learn, it usually costs you money. Now the simple problem with this was, it happened about 3 years ago. So right around the 10, 11 year mark, it only had about 200 hours on it. It all of a sudden started high idling on me actually. So I would fire it up in the morning, run it down the lake once it warmed up a little bit, 20-minute run, even a half an hour run. And when it comes down to powering down, because the throttle works off the shift lever, so when it comes down to powering down in order to get it to neutral, the engine has the idle rate down to anywhere between 700 and 900 RPM. Then you merely pull it out of gear and it sits there and idles. However, the high idle problem kept the RPM up around 1600, 1700 RPM. So at that point, it doesn't want to kick out of gear. Now the only recourse I had would be to shut it off in gear, pull it out of gear, and even after a while when you let it cool down, sometimes as soon as you fired it up, within 3, 4, 5 seconds, it would be idled right back up to 1600 RPM. Now, it clunks pretty hard when you kick it in at that RPM. So, once again, my only recourse was to fire it up, and as soon as it started, kick it into gear before it had a chance to idle up, which isn't the way they're designed to operate. Now, after a while, you can do probably some damage to that bottom leg there, just kicking it in and out like that. So, pretty much the first year, I took it to a dealership, and the diagnostic program that they had wasn't even a Mercury diagnostic. It was a different, I think he called it a Sierra program. So there was a couple of codes came up. There's 2 different high idle valves in here. There's this one right here, and then there's another one right here. I'm not sure what this one does. This one here is basically the one that when your engine's cold, it'll close the valve and then it lifts the engine RPM up a little bit to 15, 1600 RPM till the engine warms up. And then the valve's supposed to open, and then it backs off. Now, I'm not even exactly sure where the hose goes, but it goes down and hooks into here. It might be into the fuel injection system. So anyways, I replaced this one due to a code and thought it would fix it. Took it out. Didn't really do much of anything. Took it back. These are all $500 parts, mind you. Nothing on this thing I think is worth less than $500. So I took it back in. The next code that came up was there's a coil under here, under your flywheel, that actually came up. Of course, that's a $500 part too. Changed it out. Next time I took it out, it was the same thing. Didn't seem to really fix the problem. So there's already $1,000 plus hourly rate in the shop to do this. It was about $2,000 all in all by the time I did this. And yeah, didn't seem to really do the problem. So I proceeded to take it to another dealership. And they had it for a whole summer. So this is about the third summer when this is going on. So they had it for the whole summer. So this is 3 years in a row. Didn't get to use it. And big Merc dealer. Mind you, they said they would get to the bottom of it. So halfway through, they decided to tell me what the real deal was. That they didn't have the proper diagnostics. And they can only do so much off the computer. And then apparently they have to old school it, which means, you know, process of elimination. So they start playing around with stuff. And in the end, all it was they took this hose. This has a filter in it now. They started pulling this hose off of this valve here, which this is an idle control valve. My guess is it's kind of like the choke on a fuel injected. So they started pulling that off, and it ran fine. They put it back on, started idling up again. So they pulled it off, ran fine. So this is what they deemed it was in the end. Now, like I say, nothing was ever documented until they do this. So this might have been a problem that nobody knew about until they actually figured it by a process of elimination. At this point, they put the filter on there for me. And so now it gets air all the time. So now it never idles up when it's cold or anything. It always comes up to 700-900 RPM, which I'll perfectly be happy with that. After the tab reached about $3,000. So for a simple $5 filter, I ended up forking out $5,000. Seem a little bit excessive? I think so. And, you know, I would have expected maybe Mercury would help me out a little bit better than that. I mean, I don't have anything against the dealership. They were working blind halfway through it. However, they did give me a little bit of a deal on the hourly rate. But Merc in general, the company, didn't really do anything. So I'm really not impressed with that. I mean, you know, like I'm saying, that $5,000 fix should have been like maybe 1 hour of shop time, maybe $150, even a $200 fix. You know, it'd be reasonable, I guess. But yeah, so anybody that's ever had this problem with one of these, this is, like I said, 2006 Merc 4-stroke. This is what the problem could be if you have a high idle problem. And it's a extremely simple fix. Hopefully nobody else has to go ahead and put, you know, $5,000 into it. I don't know if there's been many of these problems at all. However, if there is, I mean, and the engines, you know, I mean, you should start be wearing out maybe by now if you've got a lot of hours on them and stuff like that. So if you have this problem, try that. Pull this off and see, make sure that that valve works, because like I said, there's no real diagnostic program you can plug in to actually find out. They just went by the seat of their pants and figured it out in the end. So yeah, and hopefully it won't cost you nearly as much money as it did me. Now mind you, there's still, this engine only has maybe 250 hours on it, so it's still practically brand new. I never seem to put a lot of hours on it during the year, but yeah, went for a couple of years with nothing. So, like I said, I think Mercury could have done a little bit more for me than what they did, which Mercury didn't really do anything. So, yeah, not very flattering, but I still like the engine. I mean, I'm not going to trade it out, but yeah, hopefully there's no more problems like this. So, anyways, if you have the problem, good luck with it.